What is it that such a small group of united Europeans can take a ruler and cut your continent to pieces? Here we are 63 years later talking about the Africa Union and Kwame Nkrumah's vision, Kambarage's vision, Kenneth Kaunda's have come and gone, Banda's have come and gone, Mugabe's have come and gone. And what makes it so sad is that during the liberation struggle, Tanzania becomes a home base for all of them. ANC, SWAPO, ZANU-PF, Frelimo, all of them, they were in the same camp. They all were agreeing as comrades, let's go back and liberate our countries. But immediately all of them go back to their countries. They've become enemies of each other. So are we only friends at war and we're enemies at peace? And if we can fail, therefore, as African governments in this deja vu of what we lost, over and above the culture that Chinua Achebe can echo, now we are talking about the loss of even the unity that became the fuel of our own independence. I mean, I can't imagine ZANU-PF, for example, and the ANC looking at the amount of animosity between Zimbabwe and South Africa, particularly in the health sector, and this whole thing of Dudula pulling each other out of hospital lines and pulling out drips from women that are in hospital because they don't have citizenships and all this, without necessarily pontificating or making it a good practice of jumping borders without clearances. But here you have the two political parties who are not opposition parties but ruling parties who can meet anywhere else for a conference, except we've never heard of a public meeting where ANC and ZANU-PF can come together. ANC and Frelimo and ZANU-PF and SWAPO can have a conference of, can we revisit Morogoro?
but King, let's trace it. In 1963, in Addis Ababa, the question of undoing Berlin was a live issue. And if you look at the early debates, there are those who said, let us undo the boundaries. And then it was examined, and they argued that if we started undoing the boundaries, there would be great conflict because the neo-colonizer is still with us. The same was the question of undoing Berlin was a live issue. And if you look at the early debates, there are those who said, let us undo the boundaries. And then it was examined, and they argued that if we started undoing the boundaries, there would be great conflict because the neo-colonizer is still with us. The same was revisited in Cairo in 1964, hosted by Gamal Abdel Nasser. And the key voices at that time were Nyerere and Nkrumah. Nkrumah believed that these boundaries were temporary because Africa was going to unite anyway. So his argument was, well, these are only going to be boundaries for purposes of administration, and the doctrine of inviolability of inherited boundaries was then drilled down. Little did he know that these were the things that were going to be gridlock and paddocks that would hold us together. So in 1965, when he convenes a meeting in Accra, he himself takes the view, and Nyerere speaks about it on 6th of March 1997. He says that they thought that they would come out of that meeting saying there is a United States of Africa. But the neo-colonizer was thinking differently, and a year later Nkrumah is overthrown. But Nkrumah said something that answers your question. He said that it will be easy to do away with the colonizer as the political leader. We may even solve our economic problem, but there is something that happened to our minds. And that is going to take a little longer to deal with. And he was echoing a statement that had been made in 1933 by an African-American, Carter G. Woodson, the miseducation of the Negro.
African.
And Ngugi wa Thiong'o later writes about it in terms of decolonizing the mind. And I
Brilliant book, by the way.
Yes, indeed.
And I think while you're on that, it should be illegal for anyone who wants to start talking Pan-Africanism, for example, who has not gone through 2 or 3 of those books that you have mentioned. How the African,
How Europe
civilized the world. There's one also of how the Africans civilized Europe and how Europe, uncivilized Africa, so to speak. And the Chino Achebe, great work, Things Fall Apart, and Decolonization of the Mind by Ngugi, and Steve Biko also, I Write What I Like.
I think, yes.
And I think if you can put a nice little catalog.
And Anta-Check Diop.
Yes, yeah, of course.
Anta-Check Diop. Really, those must be compulsory readings.
And
to remove, there is also, and there is no harm in that, but there is too much romanticization of Pan-Africanism without looking at the practical Pan-Africanism.
Obligation, yeah.
So I think what those books do is to drill down. There is another one that I would want to put on the list. This is Adekeye Adebayo, Africa After the Cold War, The Curse of Berlin.
But for the lighter readers, of course, The Economic Hitman.
Yes.
Then you begin to have a peep through. But I wanted to compare very, 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 in a dialogue, the dialogue between the Berlin Convention, its history. What I think was lacking even in those conferences was the African identity, Ubuntu, whatever you might want to call it, as a central place of meeting, so that in our fragmentation we don't lose each other's faces. Go back in my theological days when I was taught about the rise of the Roman Empire in one of my undergraduate studies, where Rome, when it broke apart in the reign of Caesar, then it went into the four pieces: the Calasanders, Las Macas, Ptolemy, and etc. And then further on broke apart to the Sueves, the Alemanis, the Germans, the Francophones, the Anglophones, the Herulis, the Burgundians, the Vandals, the Ostrogoths, to form what we call Europe now. The difference between their division and African division is that Romanism remained at the center of their division, so to speak. It must sound like a contradiction of terms. But when the European Union finally seeks for a common convergence into the euro dollar or the European money, when they begin to talk about foreign policy, when they begin to protect their own sovereignty, Europe has then subtly oneness in the midst of their Italian, French. Of course, the French call the British the dogs, this one called this one frogs. But when an African comes as an enemy, they quickly forget the dogs and the frogs, and they can unite over a problem. Come to Africa. The opposite seems to happen.
Hello there, you listening to me? Let me ask you this simple question. The United States of Africa, do you think it's a dream, is something that we can actually achieve? Let me know in the comment section, okay? Can we really achieve that dream of United States of Africa? As the King Maponga is narrating or saying, describing how these Europeans will put away their differences, their disagreements, their name callings, and come together as a united front to fight every opposition, especially African or Africans. But unlike Africa, the presidents are on each other's throats. And even the citizens, Africa is always at war with each other. Hence the question, this United States of Africa, can it ever be a reality for Africans? Can Africans come together as a united front, together in resources, together in decisions, together in agreements, where we travel to any other African country visa-free? Can this be possible? Let us know in the comment section. So the King Maponga and Professor Lumumba were having this insightful discussion about the challenges of Africa, the struggles of Africa, the dreams of Africa, and why Africa is the way it is till now. After so many years where we had great leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, fighting for a better Africa? Is it possible? Let's have that discussion. And thank you all so much for always joining us and tuning in. Until next time, peace out.